Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
One of the enjoyments on this program is from time to time is to interview an author of a book. I've always admired those who publish, and to help us go through their works is a treat to us, and you have responded by indicating that you do enjoy being introduced to books. Our guest today is Gabriella Brook, who is the author of the book that we're going to talk about in a moment. Our distinguished guest holds a baccalaureate degree from Washington State University. She holds master's degrees from the University of Washington, Eastern Washington University, and Gonzaga University. She is a member of the faculty at Gonzaga University teaching modern languages. Welcome to our program. We're so pleased to have you with us today, Ms. Brook. And your book that we're going to be talking about is the works of Bernfrieda, who has a subtopic of A Chronicle of Hauteville. It was published by Eastern Washington University in 1999. Thank you for coming and sharing this book with us. And we're very pleased to have a panel to assist us in discussing it with you today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And as always, I'm pleased to have our regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho. And next to her is a colleague of mine on the faculty at North Idaho College, Annie McKinley, who teaches in the Department of Speech. Welcome to all of you, and we'll invite Janelle to commence today's questioning with our author.
It's a delight to have you here today, and we're going to talk about Bernfrieda. Can you tell our viewers who was she and when did she live?
Bernfrieda it's a fictional character, and is the protagonist of my novel. She was the illegitimate half-sister of the Lady Fredezenda of Hauteville, a real historical character, who was the mother of the two conquerors of southern Italy. The story takes place in the year 1061, at the time of the Norman conquest of the south of Italy.
So it really is a medieval story.
Yes, it is.
She is telling. And she is describing life as it was in medieval times.
Yeah, she has a very special position because she's close to power. She is the sister of a powerful woman, at least powerful in her later years. But she is also the daughter of a woman who is discarded when her father marries Fredezenda's mother, and eventually dies in childbirth and is mistreated. So she has a view both of how the powerful lived and also the normal people, which really were very poor people at the time.
Annie McKinley.
On those same lines too, I've read the book a couple times and I've enjoyed it, and I was just, every time I find something different about it. Along those lines too, I guess, what inspired you to write this book? Because the characters, you seem to have a personal interest in the characters. I mean, they're not just something that came out of your dreams. I think that you have a personal interest. What inspired you to write this book?
A lot of the characters are historical characters, and I grew up in Sicily as a little girl. I lived in Sicily between the age of 5 and 13, which are impressionable years. And I remember passing through and on my way to the country and seeing the castles that Roger of Hauteville, one of my characters, built, and hearing a lot of the stories about the Norman conquest, much like you might hear the ones about the Civil War. And I was just enchanted with the stories. You know, to me, they were just stories of kings and queens and princesses. And I wanted to write something about the Norman conquest from the time I was a very young girl. I remember at 17 going into the library in Italy and trying to find out about the Middle Ages and how these people lived. It was only later on that I discovered that it was quite a different story than the one I had learned as a child.
And you mentioned one of the characters. How many of the other characters then, we know Bernfrieda is a fictional character, but how many of the characters were from history?
The main characters, let's see, Fredezenda and her two sons, Robert and Roger, and the wives of these two conquerors. But Bernfrieda is a fictional character. Her family is invented. And actually Fredezenda's too, because in history there's very little about Fredezenda. Just a name and the fact that we find in one of the chronicles that her husband married her so not to sin. As a second wife. He had been widowed and married the second young wife, not to sin. So that's all we knew about. And we don't know actually where she was buried, at the Abbey of Santa Eufemia, where my story takes place.
I think it's amazing how much research goes into such a nice publication. And you said as a young woman that you were very interested in the history of that period of time, and you'd visit libraries. Can you give our viewers a little more information on the depth of research this must have taken to, particularly what I was impressed about was the fact that you're trying to show respect and record in history someone who was lost in history. In a program we run at North Idaho College, we oftentimes go back and try to bring back to the forefront some really important people that were not recorded in history. Was this a major undertaking to try to rediscover history?
Yes, but when I started to write this book, I had no clue as to what I wanted to do. I mean, no, that's not true. I did know that I wanted to write a love story of all things, and it became a very, very different story as I progressed in my writing. I wanted to write the story of the love affair between Roger, one of the conquerors, and his wife, which is true, and it's one of the most romantic stories in the Middle Ages. It really was. But I couldn't do it. I tried really hard, and I just couldn't do it. And as I progressed in writing, I wrote a book. I wrote it in different episodes, but it didn't fall together. I wrote it in many different voices. I tried to tell it from Fredezenda's point of view, from Roger's point of view. It didn't work. And it was only when I found the voice of Bernfrieda that the book came together. And that came sort of almost by chance. I was taking a writing workshop at Eastern Washington University, and one of my colleagues and dear friend, Lisa Leitz, who later on became my editor for this book, suggested that she said, well, haven't you ever thought about using Bernfrieda? She had just read an episode. And I said, no. And I went home the same evening and I rewrote that chapter, and then I wrote like crazy. And yeah, it is a history from the margins. And I tried to really be respectful, as you say, of what is known. But I became aware fairly soon that the chronicles were written by monks in the pay of the powerful people of the time. And there was another story that had not been told. Yeah.
So I understand you're saying that you was respectful of history and you got the information you could. Of course, that far back, a lot have been lost. But did you, in addition to getting that information to be able to honor this person, also from your fictional character have to add other things that were lost in history or were never, in other words, as part of it, that you told a story without certain documentation?
You know, what I did is, actually there is a lot written about the Norman conquest of the South. There are a couple of major chronicles, one by Amatus of Monte Cassino, who is a character in my book, and the other by Geoffrey Goffredo Malaterra. But what I did is I filled in the things that were not known, and that's the part that is fictional. There are a couple of big questions in the course of this history. There are two things that are sort of mysteries. Nobody knows why the characters acted the way they did. They weren't characters, conquerors, you know. And I tried to fill in, and yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Janelle.
At the time, a lot of the writing was done by monks, and so you chose a woman, though, to be the person who's telling your story. How unusual would that have been at the time?
Quite unusual. However, even during my research, I uncovered a book that was written, a chronicle, the Alexiad, was written by a Byzantine princess, maybe 30 years after my characters, and she was, of course, a princess, and so she had opportunities that were different from those of the normal people. Bernfrieda, it's very, very difficult that somebody like Bernfrieda could have written this. But in the abbeys and in the monasteries, women did write.
Tell me now, what was life like, though, for Bernfrieda? What was it really like? We romanticize about princes and kings and queens and so forth, but what was life really like in the Middle Ages?
Well, I don't know exactly, but
but you've got to read your book to find out.
I guess grim is the word that comes to my mind. Grim, poverty, and I mean even people who were rich by our standards would be. I talk at one point about the bath that Fredesenda takes before wedding, and that is an extremely unusual thing, a warm bath that she gets to take first, not after her mother and her sister, but actually first, and the feeling. And those are things that we take for granted, but in the Middle Ages really were very special things. So.
And that same line too, the where it seems like, and there's a couple of questions here, but once the Bernfrieda's half-sister, is it Cinda? Bernfrieda?
Fredesenda, yeah, I call her Senda.
Yeah, and once her husband dies, she's pretty sure she goes off to the nunnery. Like she loses position then.
That was her mother. Yeah, Fredesenda goes to Italy with her son when Tancred dies. But yeah, that is another thing, is that even powerful women really only were powerful as long as their husbands or sons took care of them. But like in the case of Fredesenda's mother, the new daughter-in-law did not care for her, and her only option was the nunnery. Yeah.
That amazed me too. It's kind of like once they kind of lost the power, and then there was also the serfs, and there was almost the slavery during that time too.
Yeah, there is an episode, I think, in the book that actually was inspired by a chronicle written by Gregory of Tours, and it is true. The young couple that defies the Lord because they wanted to be together, and the Lord chases them to an abbey, where they hope to take sanctuary, but actually captures them and buries them alive. And this is a true story. I mean, I have included it in my book and made up the characters, but those things did happen. So it was virtual slavery for some people. And Bernfrieda is close to these people because her mother was a serf.
I thought it was interesting too. You just said that when you were first writing, you wrote it from different points of view and different voices. Yes. Do you think that strengthened the characters when you actually finished the book, or?
Well, it helped me because I hate to rewrite, but this made me rewrite, really hundreds of times. You know, it was a real chore to begin with to write this book in English for me, and this was the best way for me to do it because it was creative. Every time I would write the story in a different way. I mean, I didn't want to do it that way, but that's the way. But it was only when I found Bernfrieda the book came together.
I was just thinking that it would strengthen the characters because you could probably see it from their point of view differently. You said too about you had some editors, and I'm sure you had several people advise you on this book. Did you have someone that worked with the linguistics about what was the language like in that time to make sure that you didn't write language that would be considered modern day language, but it was actually language at the time?
Actually, in that I was lucky because my English was not a very elegant English. It was very plain, and I think even to this day I write in a plain way. But that was okay for the chronicle, and so I didn't have really a lot of problems that way. But I did have a lot of help in editing. Lisa Lights, as I said, my friend. just really worked a lot with me. And then Jim McCauley, who was the director of Eastern Washington University Press, did a really great job editing the book. Yeah, so I did have a lot of help.
Because you mentioned that they go to the nunnery. Would that be equivalent to our convents?
Yeah, convents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One of our purposes for doing this show is to get people to read the book, and I know a lot of people want to pick it up, and as we've already said, it's the Eastern Washington University Press in 1999. Is it available at different bookstores, or how one get in touch with
I hope so. The first printing is almost being exhausted, but I talked to the publisher and they assured me that it would be kept in print. And it is available at Auntie's and Hastings and in different bookstores.
And certainly bookstores with our modern technology, if they go in and they can't find it, they can order it real quick for them and get it in for them. Almost all books have a major theme, and then they have sub-themes to them. For the viewers, we won't give away the whole story. They can read it so they'll be intrigued. But if you were discussing what was your major message, your major theme of this period and your character, what would you say?
I have very strong feelings about this book, but I don't really want to talk about them. I think that there are a couple of fairly strong themes that come out. One we have discussed, the history from the margins.
Right.
All I maybe would like to say is that there is also the love of writing that comes through. I mean, writing is very important to Bernfrieda. She develops as a person and matures through her writing, because she is made to look back on her life in a completely different way. You know, she sort of lives her life like all of us do, without really reflecting or thinking. But the moment she has to put down what happened, she has to revisit it. And that causes her to mature as a woman.
One other question that I have, so I'm intrigued with the fact that you said something other authors have said on this program, and that is, you have an idea, you sit down, and at first it's not going right. It just doesn't work. And then something magical happens. In dealing with other authors you have in your book, is there just, and you've indicated this, but is there the moment when it just fits together? You're now in the right format and the right mode to do it. And I know you said that some of the colleagues that you've had have been helpful, but can you give us a little more information about how that inspires you all at once? The lights come on and this is what to do.
I can't describe the feeling. It's such a great feeling. When I found the voice, in which to tell the book, I wrote, and it was wonderful. I mean, time didn't seem to pass.
It just flowed at that point.
Yeah, it did. And the novel came together very quickly after that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Janelle?
Now, you had written a novel, and had you already agreed ahead of time that you were going to have it published? Or how did that work? What happened next? What were the steps?
Well, no, nobody would agree to publish a novel. No, I didn't. I wrote the novel and then I looked for a publisher. And I was helped. Again, Eastern Washington University, the program, the creative writing program that I was attending was very helpful. I took a workshop with John Garrett, who is a very respected historical writer of historical fiction. And he helped me a lot, provided names of agents and publishers. But it was a very, very long shot. I mean, it really was. And eventually, it was Eastern Washington University Press that picked up the book.
And you took a manuscript to them, I take it.
Yes.
And then they reviewed it. And then one day you got a wonderful call or a wonderful letter.
Yeah. It took a long time. They took the book in '95, and the book wasn't published until '99. But they did a very nice job editing it.
And then did you work with someone? It's got a colorful cover. Did you work with someone to do the illustrations in the book?
Yes. Well, I had selected this picture. It is it's a part of the procession for the wedding of the Virgin, and it's in a beautiful medieval chapel in Padua, Italy. But Scott Poole at the Eastern Washington University Press put it together and did a very nice job. The colors, the original colors are a little brighter, but I think that this, he did a really a nice job with the cover. Yeah.
Annie?
Oh, I was thinking too, along those, that in the back of the book, that this was, as I read it, and a lot of the names are not familiar names with, at first, when I first read it, I said, I'm getting so confused, I have to make my own chart, who belongs to who, and fortunately, you flip to the back of the book, and Gabrielle's already done it for us, and so I was always so pleased with that, as I go back and I try to figure out who is who. And then the other things in the back of the book, too, is this wonderful map, too, that talks about the different places, too. So being a very visual person, I think is really great. So who helped you with the tree? And
well, no, that I did actually at Gonzaga. I had some help making this map because I would not have been able to figure this out on the computer. But the maps instead are taken from a book called The Normans, and I do have some of the credits here, but they're wonderful maps because they really have. I did add a couple of cities, among which the imaginary city where Fredesenda is from, but it was pretty much already there. So there is a series of books here. How do you call it? I am blanking out. Bibliography that I put at the end with many different, both primary and secondary sources about the Normans.
I really enjoyed the book being in. I have to say that I was not a big fan of historical fiction, and before I read this, and now I have become a fan of historical fiction. And is it just me, or is it more books coming out? It's like The Red Tent. Are you familiar with The Red Tent? The Red Tent and also Pillars of the Earth seem to go along with the same writing. Do you think we're going to see more of that come out, or maybe I'm just more aware of it now?
The field that I'm interested in literature is historical fiction written by women, and I guess maybe that women, I think, are writing more and more history because, in a sense, they were excluded from it with very, with exceptions like Eleanor of Aquitaine or Elizabeth I, but women, and especially common women, were excluded from history. And now they're reclaiming it, I think. There are a lot of colleagues in Italy who write wonderful, who have written wonderful books, historical fiction. I hope that it will be translated. Some of these authors will be translated. Some have been. But I do offer a class on women writers, Italian women writers, and I select historical fiction because I think that is the way women, again, are reclaiming their place in history.
I was thinking about the Red Tent, the story of Dinah, and she gets a paragraph in the Bible, but a big book. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. You talked about writing in English was difficult for you because it wasn't your first language. Now, I believe you've translated the book into Italian, or did you write it in Italian?
No. I wrote it in English. That's the reason why it took me so long. But I translated it in Italian. And that was a wonderful experience. It was just like going home. And that happened, the book was published in Italy last spring. And I was there. I happened to be teaching at the Gonzaga in Florence program. And so I saw it come out and actually walked into the bookstores and asked for my book. Yeah. It was just, it was more exciting for me almost than when it came out here. Yeah.
Now, okay, as you say that, I was thinking, now in here you go around and promote your book, or a lot of authors do, and they go to Auntie's and they go to Barnes & Noble. In Italy, would you do the same thing? I
did a little bit of that, but not much but my publisher in Italy did some of it, and in fact the book was serialized in August in a major newspaper in Italy. Actually, it's shouldn't say major. It's a major newspaper. It's the La Repubblica on the for Sicily. The newspaper for Sicily, And they, every single day they had a chapter, so I would go on the internet, like, what are they doing now? You know? And of course they sort of slaughtered it a little bit, but that's okay. That's part of it.
Also, too, I noticed that you have the book there, and the book is smaller. Is it very common for Italian paperbacks to be in that format, or does that just happen how it happened to be?
No, this is a publisher, a good publisher. I was thrilled to be published by Sellerio. This is a special collection, so they have books, you know, they look pretty much all the same way. And no, not necessarily. She just publishes paperbacks like that. But as I said, she's a good publisher, and I'm really thrilled. She's not one of the biggest by any means, but good. Very well thought of.
You talked about when you found the fictitious character and how that came together for you. I assume that it went faster when you were doing the translation. Of course, it was just a matter of putting it in the Italian language.
I did the translation in 2 months. Okay. It was wonderful. In fact, I thought, why did I waste all that time? But actually, it was a good discipline, because the book would have been very different had I written it in Italian.
On that note, I have to bring our program to conclusion. I want to thank you for being our guest today and sharing your book with us, Gabriele Brooke. It's very nice to have you here. Good luck to you in other work you're doing. Thank you to the panel for your questions. It's always exciting to meet a new author, and good luck. I hope you will do other publishing in the future, and also good luck in this book and its sale both here and in Italy. And again, thank you for your gracious time with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the program today as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you, and we want to thank KSPS in Spokane again for allowing us to come. In fact, our first 4 programs that we have done for our 30th year has been here at the studios. The staff here and the management is just so wonderful, and we're so grateful to be associated with them for these programs. And we also thank our viewers in Idaho through the public television in Idaho for viewing our program. We're excited about our 30th year, and we'll continue to bring you programs. Please join us again next week, and we'll discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.